Day 600 of this administration, and as Bob Woodward's book Fear hit bookstores today, a new development in the Mueller-Russia investigation is looming over the White House. Washington Post reporting tonight that former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort is in talks with the special counsel's office about a possible plea deal, according to two people with knowledge of the discussions. Post reports it this way, quote, "The people who spoke on the condition of anonymity to describe the conversations cautioned that the negotiations may not result in a deal with Robert Mueller, who is prosecuting Manafort for alleged money laundering and lobbying violations. But the discussions indicate a possible shift in strategy for Manafort, who earlier this year chose to go to trial in Virginia, only to be convicted last month in Alexandria federal court on 8 counts of bank and tax fraud. The specifics of Manafort's current negotiations with prosecutors were unclear, including whether he would provide any information about the president. Even before this news broke, the Russia investigation was clearly on the president's mind. President Trump attacked the investigation on Twitter, notably before commemorating the 17th anniversary of 9/11. Also tonight, Bob Woodward is out talking about his new book as the White House continues to push back hard on his reporting and sourcing. Earlier this evening, Woodward sat down with Rachel Maddow in this studio and talked about the remaining mystery about what went on during Mike Flynn's short tenure in this White House.
Was it clear to you from your reporting for the book why they waited 18 days after getting that warning about Flynn from the Justice Department?
I think some things, sometimes decisions are not made, but they did fire him.
Ultimately.
And he did plead guilty and is a witness. No one that I've been able to find can explain exactly what happened. There's what's called the Mike Flynn mystery in the investigative reporting world, and so we presumably at some point will see.
More on that point in just a moment as the Trump administration continues to deal with the fallout from the Woodward book. This morning, Donald Trump Jr. offered up this assessment on who his father should trust inside this White House.
I think there are people in there that he can trust. It's a much smaller group than I would like it to be.
Who do you trust?
Well, I'll keep that to myself.
And they're not family?
Well, obviously, yeah, I'm talking outside of family. I think that one goes without saying.
Let's turn to our leadoff panel for a Tuesday night. Philip Rucker, Pulitzer Prize-winning White House bureau chief for the Washington Post, and Jeremy Bash, former chief of staff at the CIA and Pentagon. Gentlemen, welcome to you both. Phil, on a 10 scale of preoccupation with events on the outside, where's this president? Where's his West Wing these days?
I'd hate to put a number on it, Brian, but you're looking at 8, 9, 10 territory. The president is very preoccupied with the Woodward book, with that anonymous op-ed, with the media coverage surrounding it, and, of course, with the Russia probe. A lot of distractions this morning. He woke up on September 11th, a solemn day in this country, the 17th anniversary, and the topics he tweeted about were not September 11th, but about his preoccupations.
And Jeremy Bash, flesh out what this Flynn mystery might entail in Mr. Woodward's telling.
I actually don't think it's mysterious at all, Brian. I think when the White House was warned by Sally Yates that Mike Flynn might be vulnerable to blackmail, they took that to the President of the United States, and he said, don't worry, I've told Mike what to do, how to handle the Russians, and I've got his back. And it was only after it had become somewhat untenable internally, because Flynn had lied to the vice president, and it was clear he was under a significant FBI investigation for lying to those investigators, and it was revealed by the Washington Post that all this was going down, did the president have to relieve Mike Flynn. I actually don't think it's mysterious at all.
And, Jeremy, are you surprised by these stories about Manafort? Do you believe them?
I do believe them. I think Manafort's overall goal is to secure a pardon, and that basically means he does not want to appear publicly to be providing information about the president. He wants to limit his exposure to potential prison time in case the president doesn't come through for him. He took a huge gamble by having 2 trials. Normally, defendants don't do that because it gives the government two shots at you. He lost in the first gamble, convicted of 8 felony financial fraud counts. And now in the second case, there's no real upside for him because he's going to prison through the 20-teens. And the only question is how much into the 2020s will he serve?
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.